Eli Carter had never been one for big celebrations. 38 felt like just another number. Still, he figured a small get-together in the backyard wouldn't hurt. Nothing wild, just a charcoal grill, some folding chairs, a cooler of soda and beer, and a few friends stopping by after work. He'd mowed the lawn, hung up a string of simple lights, and even asked his neighbor across the street if the music would bother them. They laughed and told him to turn it up. By 6 p.m., the smell of burgers and ribs floated over the fence, and laughter bounced between houses like music. But not every neighbor appreciated the mood. At precisely 6:42, Karen Miller stepped out onto her porch. She didn't say a word. She stood in the shadows with her arms folded, watching Eli's birthday unfold like it was a crime scene. She wasn't dressed for a confrontation, just in sandals and her usual pastel tracksuit, but that didn't matter. Eli had seen that stance before. So had everyone in the cul-de-sac. Karen walked back into her house. 10 minutes later, Eli's doorbell rang. He expected another friend, maybe someone late from work. Instead, a thin man in a blue HOA stood there, clipboard in hand. His badge read, Michael Griggs Enforcement Liaison. Mr. Carter, the man began, not making eye contact. We've received a report of a non-permitted event involving amplified sound and obstruction of street access due to guest parking. You'll need to wrap this up immediately. You'll also be receiving a formal citation. Eli blinked. It's my birthday. The man didn't react. This is a residential area. Any gathering exceeding 10 individuals or involving vehicles must be submitted for pre-approval under HOA policy subsection 4.7. Eli looked past him. His grill hissed and sizzled. Kids from next door were tossing a football. No one was blocking anything. But the rulebook didn't care. And neither did Karen, who now stood behind her blinds, peeking through the slats like a sentry. Eli shut the door without another word. Inside, his wife Jenna was helping someone with drinks. She turned to him, confused. What was that? He explained, calmly at first. But his voice tightened as the ridiculousness of it settled in. A birthday. Not a concert, not a tailgate, just friends and burgers. And Karen couldn't even let that happen. Jenna stepped outside and whispered to a few guests. The music was turned down. Some people laughed it off. Others glanced toward Karen's house with quiet glares. The energy had shifted, the fun was gone. Eli sat by the grill for the rest of the evening, flipping burgers no one seemed hungry for anymore. At 8:30, the last guest left early. The lights were still glowing, but the party was over. That night, he took the trash out in silence. The street was quiet. Too quiet. He saw Karen again through the blinds. Still watching. He said nothing. Just turned and went back inside. But something in him had changed. A line had been crossed. This wasn't just about him. It had happened to the Marshalls when their son graduated. To the Johnsons when they threw a baby shower. Even the Thompsons got slapped with a warning for a New Year's bonfire. Eli wasn't sure what he was going to do next, but he knew he wasn't going to take it lying down. He went to bed with an idea forming. One that would change everything. About this neighborhood, about Karen's grip on the street, and about what birthdays meant from now on. And the next year, that birthday was going to be remembered. If you've ever had someone shut down your happiness over a rulebook, you'll want to see what Eli does next. Because this wasn't just a party, it was the beginning of something that would shake the neighborhood to its core. Eli didn't sleep much that night. Every time he shut his eyes, he saw the HOA man's face again, blank, bureaucratic, detached. He wasn't angry at the guy. He was just a symptom. The real disease lived 2 houses, down behind perfectly trimmed shrubs and a white picket fence that never had a speck of dirt on it. Karen Miller had turned the neighborhood into a gated cage without gates. By morning, Eli had made up his mind. He started walking the block, slowly and deliberately. He waved to neighbors. He asked questions. He brought up the party, not with bitterness, but with curiosity. One by one, they opened up. Stories poured out quietly, cautiously. Sam across the street got fined last spring for string lights on his fence. Claire on the corner couldn't host her daughter's quinceañera because amplified music wasn't permitted. Even Mr. Langston, who'd lived there since the neighborhood was built, said he'd stopped having his weekly poker night after Karen mentioned it was disruptive. No one had ever pushed back. Until now, Eli started documenting everything. Not in anger, but with precision. The rules, the violations, the double standards. He found photos of Karen's backyard tiki torch parties from the year before, saw her niece's car parked for weeks, without a permit, and even a video of Karen herself yelling at a teenager for skateboarding. But Eli wasn't interested in revenge. Not yet. He wanted something bigger. On Thursday, he printed 35 flyers, plain white paper, bold black ink. No graphics, no drama. Just a message, block chat. Saturday, 2 p.m., my driveway. Let's talk about our neighborhood. He taped them on mailboxes, slid them into door cracks, even posted one on the HOA bulletin board near the community center where Karen volunteered every Sunday. The day of the meeting, Eli rolled out his folding chairs, 30 in total. Jenna baked cookies and brewed coffee. He didn't know if anyone would show. By 1:55, neighbors were already standing around awkwardly. By 2:10, the driveway was full. People leaned on fence posts, sat on coolers, and brought lawn chairs from home. Eli didn't give a speech. He just thanked them and asked, "Anyone else feel like we're being punished for living here?" It was like lifting a lid off a boiling pot. One by one, neighbors spoke. They weren't angry at first, just tired. Tired of the petty enforcement, the sudden fines, the anonymous complaints. Tired of walking on eggshells? Some were scared to talk, afraid of getting targeted next. Others spoke loudly, like they'd been holding it in for years. Then, at exactly 2:37, the crowd shifted. Karen appeared. She didn't walk up the driveway. She stood just beyond the sidewalk, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. She said nothing, just watched, the way she always did. Her presence alone tightened the air. Conversations dropped into whispers. Some looked away. Others tensed. Eli didn't. He looked right at her and gave a calm nod. Karen didn't nod back. She turned and walked away. The meeting resumed. By 3:30, it was clear. Something was going to change. The idea came from Grace Lynn, a retired attorney who lived near the community pool. She wasn't loud, but when she spoke, people listened. What if we stop waiting for approval? What if we take our neighborhood back one party at a time? The group murmured in agreement. She leaned forward. Start with Eli's next birthday. Make it so big they can't ignore it. Everyone laughed, but then someone said, "Seriously, let's do it." By the end of the hour, 3 neighbors offered to bring catering next time. One volunteered a bounce house. Another joked about renting a marching band, but it didn't feel like a joke. Eli smiled to himself as he folded the chairs. The spark was there. The next birthday wasn't just going to be a party. It was going to be a message. And from the upstairs window to houses down, Karen watched. This time, she wasn't hiding behind blinds. She was dialing a number, and whoever was on the other end of that line, they were going to find themselves in the middle of something much bigger than a birthday. If you think that driveway meeting was the end of it, think again. What's coming next is louder, bolder, and completely out of HOA control. Keep watching, because the real battle for the neighborhood is just getting started. Karen didn't like the feeling of losing control. She had spent the last 8 years shaping this neighborhood into something clean, orderly, respectable. It was her pride, her kingdom. And now, thanks to a backyard birthday party and a man with a grill, it was slipping from her hands like sand. That Saturday, after the block chat ended, Karen didn't just call one number, she called 5. First, the HOA president. Then the community code compliance office. Then her old friend on the zoning board. She even called her brother-in-law, a property lawyer in Houston, just to ask what grounds for harassment actually meant. But by Monday morning, the response wasn't what she expected. The HOA president, Jeff Remington, returned her message with a shrug. If it wasn't an official violation, there's not much we can do, he said. That stung. Jeff had always backed her up before, but now he was talking like Eli Carter was some kind of neighborhood hero. Karen didn't wait. She acted at 5 a.m. on Tuesday. She was already walking the block, measuring fence heights, photographing garbage bins left too close to the curb, taking note of porch decorations that were technically out of season. She wasn't just watching anymore, she was hunting. By Friday, 9 separate residents received HOA notices in the mail. Everything from excessive use of garden gnomes to unauthorized deck furniture. Some were legitimate. Most were petty. All were intentional. Eli got 2 letters. One for inappropriate signage, referring to the faded chalkboard in his front yard that read, "Block chat, thanks for showing up." And another for failure to submit a noise mitigation plan, an obscure rule nobody had heard of until now. The neighborhood was buzzing. And not in a good way. People stopped waving on morning walks. Conversations dropped when Karen passed. A sense of pressure crept back in like someone had turned up the heat. The mood that Eli had helped thaw was freezing again, slowly, under Karen's rules, but Eli didn't flinch. He started spending more time outside. Fixing up his fence, watering the lawn, just being visible. Neighbors would stop by quietly, offer updates, express frustration. One even whispered, "Feels like we're under surveillance." Eli didn't say much, but he was listening. And then one night, just after 9 p.m., something strange happened. He was locking up the shed when he noticed a flicker across the street. Karen's porch light turned off then off again. He thought nothing of it, until it repeated. Then again, he waited. 5 minutes later, a black SUV rolled up. It parked behind Karen's house, half hidden from view. 2 people got out, teenagers, maybe early 20s. They carried backpacks, and looked around nervously before slipping inside through the side door. Eli narrowed his eyes. He stepped back behind the shed, watching quietly. Something wasn't right. Over the next 3 nights, the same SUV appeared. Different people, same routine. Always after 9. Always entering quietly through the side. Jenna noticed too. "You think she's renting out rooms?" "Maybe worse," Eli said. He wasn't the only one paying attention. Claire from the corner house knocked on his door that Saturday. "Karen yelled at my son for skateboarding yesterday," she said, "but she's got strangers coming and going after dark. I saw one leave this morning wearing a nightclub wristband." Eli smiled for the first time all week. The game had shifted. Karen wanted to play rules? Fine, but rules work both ways. That night, Eli installed a new camera on the corner of his garage. Motion activated, night vision, perfect view of Karen's side yard. He didn't plan to use it publicly, not yet, but it was insurance. Sunday morning, the neighborhood woke to something unexpected. A sign, big, bold, homemade, right in Eli's yard. Birthday bash 2. Save the date, July 14th. Bring your own chair. No lights, no music, no noise. Just the message. Karen saw it at 6:50 a.m. She stared for a full minute, before walking back inside without a word. The next battle had been declared. But what Karen didn't know, what no one did, was that Eli had helped this time. Serious help, someone with a long memory and a plan that went beyond parties and posters. And when the truth about Karen's secret guests came out, the real war for the neighborhood would begin. Stick around, because the next chapter doesn't just shake the block, it cracks the foundation. What's hiding behind Karen's closed doors is going to bring the entire HOA to its knees. The security camera didn't lie. Eli reviewed the footage the next morning, coffee in hand, eyes fixed on the monitor. The SUV had returned at exactly 9:18 p.m. for new faces, this time young, jittery, dressed like they were headed to a basement rave. One of them had a Bluetooth speaker in hand. Another was carrying a plastic bin. They weren't family. They weren't friends. They were hiding. Jenna leaned over his shoulder. "Still think it's just an Airbnb?" "I don't think Karen's that generous," Eli said. He wasn't looking to expose her yet, but the hypocrisy was starting to burn. For someone obsessed with rules, Karen sure had her own playbook. Over the next week, the pattern continued. More visitors. Always, after dark. Some stayed less than an hour. Others didn't leave until morning. It didn't take long for the neighbors to notice. Whispers spread down the street like wind through dry grass. By Thursday, Eli got a knock on the door from a man he'd only spoken to once, Anthony Green, a quiet IT guy who lived 3 doors down with his teenage son. "She's running something weird," Anthony said. "I installed motion lights by my garage and they've been going off every night. One guy parked half on my lawn and pretended to be lost." Eli showed him the footage. Anthony nodded slowly. "So we're not crazy." "Nope," Eli said. By Saturday there were 4 neighbors sharing info, then 7. Jenna started a group chat labeled Cul-de-sac Watch. Within 3 days, it had 15 members. They weren't gossiping, they were documenting license plates, times, faces, and still. Karen watched them like they were the ones doing something wrong. Then came the slip-up. Sunday morning, 8:12 a.m., as Eli was bringing the trash bin to the curb. He heard raised voices coming from Karen's backyard. Not loud, but sharp. Heated. A man's voice. Then Karen's. Something about money. Something about timing. Then the back gate slammed open. A man in his 20s stormed out, short, muscular, wearing a hoodie despite the heat. He shoved something into his backpack and sprinted down the sidewalk. As he passed, Eli, Their eyes met for a split second. Eli recognized that look. It wasn't embarrassment, it was panic. By the time Karen opened her front door and peered down the street, the man was gone. The next morning, Claire sent a message in the group chat. "This isn't about noise anymore. I think we need to take this to the board." But Eli wasn't ready. Not yet. Not until he had something that couldn't be brushed off. The HOA board had always protected Karen, or at least looked the other way. If he went now, it would be her word against his. And her web of excuses was stronger than most people's patience, so he called in backup. That afternoon, he met with Grace Lynn, the retired attorney who'd helped draft HOA letters last year when Karen fined her for a hammock strung between two trees. Grace wasn't just smart, she was thorough. "I want to run a full check," Eli said. "Property records? Registrations? Any code violations?" Grace smiled. Already started. By Thursday, they had a list. The house Karen lived in wasn't hers, it was still in her ex-husband's name. She wasn't legally authorized to serve on the HOA board anymore. The bylaws had a clause about residency requirements. Something she'd slipped through the cracks during elections. And then came the big one. The SUV, registered to an address in another state. The man with the backpack. Grace had seen him before. He was connected to a short-term housing scheme that had been shut down last year in Phoenix. Illegal sublets, off-books rentals, the kind of thing that makes neighborhoods nervous and city inspectors show up in suits. Eli didn't. Celebrate, he printed everything. Neatly, quietly. The next block meeting was only 3 days away. He knew Karen would be there. He also knew that, when the truth came out, when the neighbors who'd been fined for fence paint and wind chimes found out what Karen had been hiding, it wouldn't just ruin her credibility, it would light the fuse on something much bigger. Don't blink. The next meeting doesn't end with raised hands, ends with raised voices, shifting power, and the moment Karen's world starts to crack. You won't believe who sides with her. And who turns against her. The community center smelled like folding chairs and old carpet. It was the first Tuesday of the month, the day the HOA board met under flickering fluorescent lights to discuss paint samples and tree root complaints. But this time, the room wasn't filled with bored retirees and people checking watches. It was packed, standing room only. Eli sat near the back with a folder in his lap and Jenna beside him. Grace Lynn was across the aisle, flipping through her own set of documents with surgical precision. Anthony Green leaned against the wall, nodding silently to neighbors as they trickled in, and right at the front table, as always, sat Karen. She wore a pale pink sweater set, her posture perfect, a pen poised between two manicured fingers. To someone who didn't know better, she looked calm, in control. But Eli noticed the tightness in her jaw. The meeting began like any other. Jeff Remington, the HOA president, read the agenda. Roof colors, pet noise complaints, tree trimming. Then, as if scripted, Karen leaned toward the mic. "I'd like to raise a concern," she said, voice smooth. "There have been repeated violations of community noise ordinances and unauthorized signage at several homes, most notably Mr. Carter's." Eli didn't react. He just waited. Karen continued. "If we let these things slide, we risk creating an environment that disregards the HOA charter we all agreed to. We cannot let one household's disregard for rules disrupt the peace we've built here." The room was still. Then Eli stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't smile. "I have a few concerns of my own." Jeff nodded, giving him the floor. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Eli held up a single sheet. "This is a record of vehicle sightings at one particular home on this block between the hours of 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. over the past 3 weeks. These visits weren't made by residents. They weren't reported. And they weren't permitted under short-term stay regulations." He walked forward and handed the paper to Jeff. Karen shifted slightly in her seat. Eli pulled out another page. "This is a public record indicating that the property in question isn't owned by the occupant. Meaning, under the HOA bylaws, that person no longer qualifies to serve on the board." Karen started to speak, but Jeff raised his hand. Grace stood. She held up a manila envelope. "And this," she said, handing it to the vice president, "is a set of witness statements, photographic documentation, and confirmed municipal code violations committed by that same resident over the past 6 months, including illegal short-term rental activity." Someone in the back gasped. A few murmured. Karen sat very still. Jeff read quietly. His mouth twitched once. He looked up. "Is this verified?" Grace nodded. Eli didn't look at Karen. He looked at the board. Many of us have been fined, warned, even embarrassed over tiny violations. Meanwhile, serious infractions, real ones, have gone ignored. We're not asking for revenge. We're asking for fairness. For accountability. Jeff was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at Karen. I'm going to ask you to step out of the room, he said. Karen hesitated. I have a right to. You'll be allowed to respond after executive session, he said firmly. Karen stood, slowly. The pen trembled in her hand. For the first time, her armor cracked. She walked out of the room. 15 minutes later, the board returned. Jeff spoke. Effective immediately. Karen Miller is suspended from the HOA board pending investigation into multiple code violations and misconduct. The room didn't erupt, it breathed. For the first time in years, it felt like air had returned to the block. Neighbors stood, some clapped, some hugged. Eli stayed seated, watching it all unfold like a man who had just turned a wheel he'd spent months building. But the victory wasn't complete. Because just before she left the building, Karen turned back. She didn't scream, she didn't threaten, she smiled. That cold, knowing smile. She had something else planned, and Eli could feel it. This wasn't over. Not yet, the crown just fell. But the queen isn't done. In the next chapter, Karen's plan B comes out of hiding. And what she sets in motion could divide the neighborhood faster than any party ever united it. Don't miss it, because what's coming next changes the game completely. The street felt different, lighter, freer. For a few days after the meeting, neighbors waved more, kids played louder. And Eli actually saw someone hang a wind chime without looking over their shoulder. But Eli didn't feel settled. He knew Karen too well. She wasn't the kind of person to walk away quietly. Sure enough, it started with a letter, not from the HOA, but from an attorney's office. Delivered by courier, addressed to Eli by name. The envelope was thick. Inside was a cease and desist notice, accusing him of slander, neighborhood defamation, and coordinated harassment. 3 full pages of vague legal threats wrapped in official-sounding language. It wasn't from the HOA, it was from Karen's personal lawyer. Jenna read it twice and set it down. She's playing defense with offense, she said, trying to make you flinch. But Eli wasn't flinching. He was watching. The camera he'd mounted weeks ago still recorded every night. And now, instead of secret guests, Karen had contractors coming in. 2 men in matching polo shirts started working on her side yard. They moved fast, hauling in landscaping equipment and cutting down bushes. Then came the real surprise. They poured a concrete slab by Friday. A prefab storage building had been delivered and set up behind her house, completely out of view from the street, but not from Eli's camera. Anthony Green stopped by that afternoon. She's building something, he said, and it's not for gardening. I asked one of the workers what it was for. He said community services. That sound normal to you? Not a bit, Eli said. They both knew what it meant. Karen wasn't just striking back. She was launching something. By Sunday, a flyer appeared on every door in the neighborhood. Bright, cheerful, printed on glossy paper. It read, Miller Center for Community Harmony, free weekly events. Organized gatherings. Local enrichment. Hosted by longtime resident Karen Miller. Open to all who value peace, order, and respect. There was no mention of the HOA, but the message was clear. Karen was building her own power base. Not through rules but through structure. Programs, soft control. She's going rogue, Jenna said. She's creating her own HOA. Eli said. It was smart. Too smart, and worse. It started working. Some neighbors, people who had been quiet during the conflict, started showing up. Not the loud ones, not the party crew. The quieter residents. The ones who liked the old ways. Who didn't care for Eli's block chats or birthday flyers. People who liked rules. And Karen knew it. That Wednesday, Karen hosted her first Harmony Circle in the new building. 12 people showed up. The next week there were 18. She even passed around a clipboard titled, Neighborhood Improvement Committee, Volunteer Sign Up, and the scary part. Some of those names were familiar. Even Jeff Remington, the HOA president, showed up. I'm just here to listen, he told Eli when asked. But Eli could see the cracks forming. The neighborhood was dividing. Slowly, quietly, into 2 camps. One led by Eli, powered by laughter and freedom. The other, Karen's camp. Built on rules, control, and whispered consequences. Grace Lynn wasn't surprised. She's doing exactly what people in power do when they lose it: rebrand, regroup, retake. Eli sat on his porch that night and watched the lights flicker on inside Karen's new building. He could hear faint voices. Laughter, even it was happening again. Only this time, Karen wasn't calling the HOA, she was becoming one. And unless someone stopped her, everything Eli had helped rebuild: trust, freedom, community, it could all vanish. But he wasn't going to stop her with signs or meetings. Not this time. He needed something big. Something that couldn't be ignored. And he had just the idea. The next move isn't just bold, it's legendary. Eli's plan to reclaim the block is about to flip the script and leave Karen scrambling. Stick around, because what happens at the next birthday party, no one will see coming. Eli circled July 14th on the calendar with a red marker. His 39th birthday was coming. And this time, it wasn't just a celebration, it was a statement. The neighborhood was divided, and everyone knew it. On one side, Eli and the neighbors who wanted freedom, fun, and community without fear. On the other, Karen's growing harmony circle, a polished machine of order disguised as enrichment. But this birthday wasn't going to be about her. Eli didn't post flyers. He didn't host meetings. He didn't send texts through the chat. Instead, he started building quietly. First came the stage, a simple wooden platform in his backyard, assembled with help from Mason, Anthony, and 2 retired contractors from 3 houses down. Then came the light, solar-powered, no noise violations. Jenna contacted a local band. Grace handled the legal side, ensuring every permit was in order, down to the minute. Eli even rented porta-potties. Every single angle Karen might attack had been sealed, but he still hadn't revealed what the party would really be. Not until the morning of, at 7 a.m., Eli placed a single sign at the entrance to the neighborhood. Carterfest starts at 5. You're either with the block, or in the way. By 2 p.m., folding chairs lined the sidewalks. Bounce houses were being inflated on 4 different lawns. The scent of barbecue smoke drifted through the air, carried by a steady buzz of voices and laughter. Karen watched from her front window. Her newly built Miller Center was still locked. A paper sign taped to the door read, "Tonight's Harmony Circle canceled." She hadn't canceled it. No one had RSVP'd. At 4:45, a man in a suit pulled up to Eli's house in a black sedan. His name was Cole Brighton. Local journalist and weekend news anchor. Grace had tipped him off a week ago. By 5:10, Cole's cameraman was filming Carterfest from the sidewalk. Neighborhood tension turns into backyard revolution, he said into the mic. What started as a birthday party has grown into something bigger, battle for the soul of a community. Eli didn't speak to the camera. He didn't need to. The footage spoke for itself. Kids laughing, neighbors grilling, a retired couple square dancing with strangers. One man in a llama costume leading a conga line down the middle of the street. But the real moment came at sundown. Eli walked onto the small stage, cleared his throat, and held up a glass of iced tea. No speeches tonight, he said, but I do want to say one thing: this isn't about me. It's about all of us, living here, being real, and not letting anyone tell us we can't be neighbors. The crowd clapped, cheered, even whistled, and then, just as planned, the projector clicked on. The screen behind Eli lit up. It showed a clipped short silent footage from Eli's own security camera, Karen's backyard, her Harmony Center. A group of men entering through the side door, handing over envelopes. Karen smiling. A stack of money being counted. No narration. No accusations. Just a minute of quiet proof. The crowd fell still. Then the clip ended. Eli stepped back, handed the mic to Mason, and disappeared into the crowd. He didn't need to say more. The neighborhood had seen it. Together, Karen appeared 15 minutes later, walking toward the party in a pale gray cardigan. Her smile strained, but this time, no one looked her way. No one waved. The crowd simply turned, like a tide. She stopped short. Her face froze. Then she turned and walked back toward her house. She never made it to the porch. A city code enforcement officer met her halfway. "We need to talk about the building out back," he said quietly, flashing a badge. Karen didn't argue. She didn't even speak. She just followed him inside, and from across the street, Grace watched with folded arms. "I guess it's true," she whispered to Eli, who had reappeared beside her. "People always show up for birthdays, especially when the neighborhood's been reborn." The final twist is coming. In the last chapter, Karen makes one last desperate move, but what happens next surprises everyone, even Eli. Stay tuned, because the final 5 minutes will flip the entire story on its head. The evening after the party felt surreal. The street was quieter than usual, but the energy lingered like a low hum after a thunderstorm. Karen's house was darker than ever. The Harmony Center was officially closed for the foreseeable future. The city had posted notices on the door about violations and fines. The HOA board was in disarray. Eli should have felt victorious, but he didn't. He sat on his porch, staring at the flickering lights across the street. Something didn't sit right. 2 nights later, a knock came at his door. It was Karen, no makeup, no pastel sweaters. Just her, looking tired and defeated. "I want to talk," she said quietly. Eli hesitated but stepped aside. They sat in his living room. Jenna offered coffee. Karen accepted. "I've been so focused on the rules," Karen began. "The order, the control. I thought that was the only way to keep the neighborhood safe and respectable." She looked down, fingers twisting a bracelet, "But I lost sight of something else, something I didn't expect." "What's that?" Eli asked. "Community," she said. "Real community, not just regulations and fines. I saw what you did at your birthday party. How everyone came together, how much they laughed, how they finally felt free." Eli listened. "I'm sorry," Karen said. "For the fines, for the surveillance, for all of it." He nodded, surprised but not sure what to say. Then she surprised him even more. "I want to help." The next few weeks were strange but hopeful. Karen didn't disappear. She showed up. She helped organize block cleanups and even offered to co-host a monthly potluck at Eli's house. Slowly, the neighborhood started to heal. But the real twist came one morning when Eli found a box on his porch. Inside was a letter from Karen and a photo album. The album chronicled the neighborhood through the years: picnics, holidays, kids playing, even Karen's own family barbecues. It was a reminder that beneath all the rules and conflicts, they were neighbors. People trying to do their best. At the very end, Karen had written, "I was the problem. But now, I want to be part of the solution." Eli smiled. He showed the album to Jenna. "Looks like the HOA's toughest critic just became its biggest ally," he said. And just like that, the neighborhood wasn't just a place with rules. It was a place with heart. The birthday parties. They continued every year, bigger and better, but now, Karen was there, too, sometimes grilling, sometimes laughing, and always listening. If this story taught us anything, it's that even the toughest neighbors can change. And sometimes, the biggest battles bring the best neighbors together.